Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. This is your host, Bill Whittle. Hope everybody's doing well, and it's good to see you. Um, some interesting and important things to talk about tonight. I think. I hope. Don't even really know where to start about this, but I'll probably just start with how this idea came to me. I teased this a little bit before. At the beginning, I'd just like to stress this got nothing to do with the Major Mace Mattingly stuff. That stuff is going on completely independently of this. This is something that I've been toying around with that's just completely different and separate. So a number of times people have said, "Hey, Bill, you should check out Cameo." And for those of you unfamiliar with the site, like I was, Cameo is a place where you can have a list of celebrities, and you can get them to do a recorded voice message for you, or say hello, or that kind of thing. And I took a look at it, sort of as just a revenue enhancer kind of thing. And what blew me away was just with just the prices. I mean, it's like Malcolm McDowell cost like $100, and I just thought, wow, he can't be doing it for the $100. I think a lot of the people on Cameo are, people who've kind of been around the pop culture for a long time, and I personally think that most of this is them just having a chance to reconnect with fans and to do all of those things. But strangely enough, what I came out of the Cameo experience with was an idea not to get paid by Cameo, but to actually pay Cameo. And that's basically what kind of got this thing going for me. So in really broad terms, this country is so divided, and the politics has gotten so acidic and venal, and it's not just a question of me just constantly wading into this and just being corroded by this daily parade of outrages and indictments and the transgendered swimmers and all the rest of it. I get the feeling other people are a little sick of it too, and that actually got me thinking about how I got started here. Not with the stuff at PJTV, but started. I got started doing Silent America on Eject, writing essays about what I liked about America, what I thought was going unsaid about America, all the things that all the defenses of America and this country and what this country is and what this Western lifestyle is that weren't being expressed, that were just going underneath the just buried underneath this kind of assault on all of these things that people like you and me love so much. Thank you, Cody. And so I've been giving that a great deal of thought lately. And when I look back on what those essays were about, I realized that the situation today has deteriorated enormously since then, which paradoxically means I think they're much more in demand. I think they're much more important. And I've been really, since the beginning of the political videos, back at PJTV, like the one on Trayvon Martin and stuff, but concentrating more and more and more on this daily political analysis. And I don't know if that's really what we need right now, or at least another one of those. I'm not saying I'm going to give that up or anything. I've just been, for quite a while now, just been wondering what else is there to say about this. I just don't really, I don't really know. I've done about 300 afterburner firewalls kind of thing. And And when it comes down to that and the political stuff, it seems to me like I just be repeating what I was about to say. So I started really thinking at like a very, very fundamental level about what it is that I do and what it is that people like. And the conclusion I've come to is that I should be doing something that I think is better for the country than just talking about what the hell's wrong with the country. I don't think there's ever been a more important time for optimism and lightheartedness and not false hope, just and certainly not escapism either. Just something, just something positive. And so I've had this rattling around in my head for quite a while. So I got on Cameo and I just took a look at it, as I said, mostly just as a income boost. And I looked at what it cost to talk to some of these people, and I had this really crazy big insight, this idea, and I wanted to talk to you guys about it and see what you had to say. So let me just pull up a picture here. So here's what I'm wanting to do. I got a bunch of problems I have to solve. One of them is getting new members in. Another one is keeping the God knows the hardcore loyal people that we have, and so on. And I've been looking at other people's business models and all the rest of it. And there's something about me that I'll get to in a few minutes. It's just some kind of mental defect that I've got and had for a long time, but I'll get to that in a minute. But here's where my thinking went. I started looking at these names on Cameo, and then I started thinking about the names of the famous people that I know. And I'll just come out and say this, because this is not just a test idea. This is just practically me time in the confession chamber. I have a hard time, a very hard time, going and doing membership drives and raising money, because sitting here talking to you guys is very difficult for me to see where the value in that is. I know there's value there. I know that intellectually, but on some level, I still can't believe it. I know I do good work, and I know I do important work because I hear from people. But it's just hard to go out and sell shoes when you're the shoes. And so what I thought about was, I've been through the work I've done, I almost said lucky, but really honestly just through a lot of hard work over a long period of time, I've gotten to know a number of famous people. And what I would like to do is I would like to start a new show once a week. And I was going to call it In the Moment, but I think I'm going to call it Life Lessons. And this is what I want to do. I want to interview celebrities mostly, not exclusively, but mostly. And I want to talk to them about things that I never hear them talk about before. I've come to realize that the success of Silent America and Eject, and the best of the Firewalls and Afterburners I do, and Stratosphere Lounge, which is, I think this is damn near 375 episodes of this show. So to me, it all sounds like it comes down to storytelling, and I think when storytelling is going at its best, it's possible to get moral truth and get that across as stories. We communicate with stories. I talk about this all the time. The Bible's nothing but a series of stories. And I thought, it would be interesting to talk to the people who make the stories about the stories. And it struck me that would be fun, because I can be funny when I'm having a good time with people. I thought it'd be fun. I thought it'd be deep. I know how to. I know how this business works. I'm in this business. I know how to ask people questions that I think would get responses from them that they don't normally get a chance to talk about. But mostly, I just thought this whole thing would be really uplifting. I just thought it'd be good to do. So I've sent out a couple of emails, and I don't know, just pump priming emails. And I don't know what the response is. I've only got one response back, but I only sent them just a short time ago earlier today. So what I wanted to do with this show, I thought I'd call it, instead of calling it In the Moment, I thought I'd call it Life Lessons. Because I think there's a lot to learn about how to make a better society, but and how to make better people out of ourselves. And so I'd like to stress that I don't have confirmation on any. I have confirmation on one of them as I sit here. But the thought occurred to me that it would be good to talk to Jon Voight about vulnerability, because that's what makes Midnight Cowboy work. And I don't know whether John will be able to do it or not, but I asked him. And as I was thinking about this, I realized, no, this is the thing to do. It can't be just like a what's your favorite color kind of celebrity interview. I don't think that does anyone any good. It has to be about something important. And in the case of John, I thought about his breakout roles, and I started asking myself, what is it about those characters, specifically in Midnight Cowboy? And I realized it was about vulnerability, and I also realized that for those of you not familiar with it, the thumbnail sketches of this is the only X-rated movie ever to win a Best Picture, and it was X-rated because it was about a gigolo. And it's not an X-rated film. I don't think it would even be an R-rated film by today's standards. But basically, the story is about a guy who's Jon Voight is this 6'3" tall, blonde, good-looking guy who's a minor hustler. He's a gigolo in Texas. Gets on the bus, goes to the big city to make it big, meets this very sick street guy from Brooklyn, who's played by Dustin Hoffman, who's just the polar opposite of what John's character, whose name was Joe Buck, is. And there's this combination, this friendship and this mutual relationship in terms of helping each other between Joe Buck and this guy Rico Rizzo, who everybody calls Ratso Rizzo because he's just so small and sick and weak. And there's a lot of themes running through that movie. One of them is how the city can strip away your ideals and the kind of the corrupting aspect of big city life. But ultimately, it's a friendship about these two people who are as unlikely as they could possibly be, and what they do for each other. And at the end of the movie, I'm not going to give away any spoilers or anything, but at the end of the movie, Joe Buck has done an awful lot to help Rizzo, who's, like I said, constantly sick, and he's got that kind of loyalty and that kind of small town decency about him. And what Ratso Rizzo does for Joe Buck is he peels away Joe's image of himself and reveals the person who he really is, and it's a much better person. He basically throws away the cowboy hat and the whole thing, and he comes out of the movie. Joe Buck comes out of the movie as a whole person rather than as a cartoon person, which is the kind of person he was when he went into it. And the reason I think that this is interesting to me on a larger scale is because right now, despite the fact that I'm nothing but fangs and claws when I think about what's happening to this country, what I think the country needs more than anything is the realization that by analyzing and looking at movies, stories. I don't want to say movies ever again. I want to say stories. That's what I'm talking about. What I got out of that, looking at it with new eyes, was that Joe Buck is naive, healthy, handsome, strong, red state America, and Ratso Rizzo is short, ugly, limping, sick, blue state America. But the point isn't that red state America comes in and kicks blue state America's ass. The point is that these two characters got to develop a friendship and a love between each other, and they both saved each other's lives. And I think talking about that is really, really, really interesting to me. Really interesting to me. What is it about this? It's clear to see what the appeal of Joe Buck is. I mean, John Voight is just like a Greek god, comes out of nowhere. He's this incredibly handsome, strong, big, happy, friendly, gregarious guy. And so we know what he brings to the table, but what is it that Rizzo brings to the table? What is it that he does? And if you start thinking about this on a deeper level, you really kind of get to the heart of what makes America work when it's working, is this combination of urban and rural, this combination of these two characters making something that's not as naive as Joe Buck, not as cynical as Ratso Rizzo, and I just think that would be really interesting to talk about. I sent out an email to Gary Sinise, and Gary has had any number of interviews and what he's done for veterans, not just in terms of movies, but with the Gary Sinise Foundation and the number of houses that they've built for people, and the number of lives that they've saved. What Gary does is unbelievable, and he's talked about that before. But what I wanted to talk to him about was how did he get to Lieutenant Dan as an actor? What did he bring to that character that resonated with so many veterans when other movies hadn't, including John Voight. John Voight did Coming Home about a crippled Vietnam vet, and he did a tremendous performance, and the movie got lots of raves, but it didn't activate veterans the way that Lieutenant Dan did. And Tom Cruise did the same thing with Born on the 4th of July. That story has been told a number of different ways, but what Gary did with Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump activated veterans. It didn't just motivate them, it activated them. I've watched from the sidelines how much genuine love and affection and gratitude that vets have towards Gary because of what Gary did in that movie. But I want to know. I want to talk to Gary about what did Gary bring to Lieutenant Dan that made Lieutenant Dan work the way that it worked. That's what I want to do. This is the aspect of storytelling that I want to get into. I want to get into what is that. When I sent out these emails, and I just sent out 4 or 5 of them. What is that alchemy? What is that secret ingredient that makes a movie, a story, into something bigger than that in the real world? And I've seen his reaction, both on camera in interviews he's done and in person. I've seen his reaction to the kind of feedback and the love he gets because of all of the things that he does. And I think other people have seen that too. I want to know where did Lieutenant Dan come from? And what is it about Lieutenant Dan that was so moving? I mean, just right now live on YouTube, Christopher Chambers says when Kaladin Stockley says Lieutenant Dan's an excellent character, great performance, absolutely true. And then Chris Chambers says, when Lieutenant Dan lashed to the mast, and come what may, that was Gary's truth. All of this is true. But I want to hear it from the guy who put it together. We can all look and say things like over in the Twitch stream. We can talk about the real anger that Lieutenant Dan had. Yeah, his bitterness, and his working through that, and his smart assedness. But you don't have no legs, Lieutenant Dan. I'm aware of that for us. All of this stuff, yes. But I want to know, and I think probably you would like to know. I think it'd be interesting to you as an audience to understand the process that he used in order to get there, because he did something beyond an excellent performance, because Gary Sinise can't turn in a bad performance. He did something that Tom Hanks hasn't done. Tom Hanks has won, back-to-back Academy Awards, but it's just he connected to people in a way that Forrest Gump didn't. I just find that really, really interesting. I know this is just a name-dropping thing, but basically this is a name-dropping show. Again, I'm very reluctant to talk about these things because I have not heard confirmation one way or another. And if it turns out for any reason these guys cannot do this, then they cannot do it for excellent reasons. And so I don't want to promise anything I can't deliver. But one of the emails I sent out was to Adam Baldwin, who I got to know rather well. And so I want this show to be focused. I want it to be about life lessons. So I want to talk to John Voight about innocence and vulnerability. And I want to talk to Gary Sinise about impact, about the power that movies have. When I sent out the email asking Adam if he'd be willing to sit down and talk for half an hour, 45 minutes, I said, I want to talk to you about the tough guy. I want to talk to you about the tough guy. And let me interrupt myself here because Christopher Chambers put his finger on exactly what I want to talk about here in the YouTube chat. He said Gary's soul bled out through his character, and so did John's. And I want, and to some degree I do this on the show as well. There's a lot of things I talk about, and one of them's coming up, and that is not only not easy for me to talk about, it just I'd really much rather have a root canal without anesthetic than go through some of these things. But it's important, and courage is courage. And when you see the kind of vulnerability that John or Gary put out, it may not seem like that takes guts, but it does, because these guys are reaching into the deepest part of themselves and putting it out there. And you may not realize where it's coming from, but it's coming from somewhere. It's almost always coming from somewhere really painful. And to put it up there on the screen and to not pull back, to not pull your punches on it. This is what it feels like to be this angry or this heartbroken or this cynical or this, this hurt. John, this interests me. And I think it's interesting on a very, very high level, interesting. And I think it's good for everybody in this country to hear these things now, because when I was sending out these emails, I said, I would like this show to have one overriding premise, and the premise of what I want to do with this show is the series of shows. The only thing I am insisting on is that, number one, we don't talk politics, but the key thing is people have to come out of this episode feeling better than they did when they went into it. That's all I'm asking. That's all I want. I just want people to come out feeling better than they did when they went in, because everybody's feeling awful, and they're feeling awful all the time. And I don't, not only am I tired of it, and not only am I saturated, I just think it's a bad thing for us to be doing, is to continue with this division. I think it's time to start building some things. So when I emailed Adam, I said, I want to talk to you about Tough Guy. about the tough guy. I said, it's not the villain, because you're supposed to hate the villain. And it's not the heavy, because same thing with the heavy. The heavy's supposed to be somebody you're afraid of. That's not the kind of character I'm talking about. I want to talk to Robert Davi about that guy. But what I want to talk to Adam Baldwin about is, how is it that Animal Mother from Full Metal Jacket, and especially Jane Cobb from Firefly, how is it that you like these guys when there's nothing to like about them on paper? What are you putting in there, Adam? What element are you adding to this recipe that turns this from a brutal murdering killer into a brutal murdering killer that you like, that you're sympathetic to? What is that? And all of these things can lead to questions like, so how do you the email for John was talking a bit about Deliverance too. I mean, in Deliverance, you've got these four guys, and you've got Ned Beatty's character, who's weak. You've got Ronnie Cox's character, who's idealistic and naive, and then you've got Burt Reynolds, who's brutal and cruel. And Jon Voight's character is the only one of them that is in balance. He's the only actual real man there, because he's been able to put these pieces that each one of these guys has together. And so what makes a man, John? What when you build that character, what are you putting in there? And what can we put into our lives as well? How can we learn from this? This is why I want to call it life lessons. How do we do this? How does Adam Baldwin play particularly ruthlessly brutal guys who, but let's not even say brutal, just guys who just revel in violence? What redeems him? Now, I did get one confirmation back of the ones I sent out just earlier today. So we're going to be doing one of these at least. We're going to be doing more than one. I heard back from Tom Dreesen, who said he'd just be delighted to do the show. Now, for those of you who don't know Tom Dreesen is a stand-up comic. And Tom is... There are... almost all comedy now is... let's just call it personality comedy. Brian Regan, for example, or other comedians who I admire very much, Mitch Hedberg, all these guys, they're almost all personality comedians. And what I mean by that is Stephen Wright's a great example. Stephen Wright sets up this bizarre character with this bizarre look and this bizarre voice, and then everything he says after that is funny because of the character he plays. But Tom is a joke teller. That's what Tom does, and he does it better than anybody I've ever seen in my life. I can't tell you how many events I've been to with Tom Dreesen. And Tom Dreesen is the best joke teller I have ever heard. So I want to talk to him about, I will talk to him. This one I can assure you is going to happen. I want to talk to Tom Dreesen about timing. And I want to talk to him about how jokes work. Because I've got a theory about jokes, and my theory about jokes is that a joke is always about a reversal. And that's why when you tell a joke, most of the jokes that you hear give you have to hear the situation 3 times. Man walks into a bar, and then something happens, and then something happens, and this 3. It's either a rabbi, a priest, and an imam, or the guy does something 3 times. So what that's happening, what that's doing is, if he does it 1 time, it means nothing. If you hear the story 2 times, then you think, okay, that this is this is a theme, but 3 times is a line. 3 dots is a line. So that just about every joke you know. Well, first he does this, well, then he goes back and he says, and it raises the state, and the third, and he goes back and raises it again, and it's basically a line. And what makes people laugh is the 4th time is a complete reversal of where that line was going. It's an absolute reversal. And that's what I think is interesting, and that's what I want to hear Tom talk about, because what Tom does better than anybody I've ever seen is that Tom will walk you on that line. This is where the story's going. The story is going here. And then he is so good at getting you to walk down this line that when he drops that reversal on you, it's hilarious. If you wrote the joke down and gave it to 50 people, you'd get a laugh out of most of them, but you wouldn't get the kind of laugh that Tom gets, because not only does Tom know how to time that joke and deliver that line, he knows how to get those ducks in a row, and I want to talk to him about that. And the other thing I want to talk to him about, not widely known about Tom Dreesen. Well, first of all, Tom Dreesen opened for Frank Sinatra for a number of years. Tom Dreesen has been a guest host of The Tonight Show. Those are legends. I mean, he toured with Frank Sinatra for years, when he was starting his career. But what's not widely known about Tom Dreesen is Tom Dreesen was part of the first real bookable black and white comedy team called Tom and Tim, or Tim and Tom, I don't remember which, with Tim Reed, who was on played Venus Flytrap on WKRP in Cincinnati. Those 2 guys were a comedy act, and they were the first multiracial comedy duo in the country. They got booked everywhere. And David Booty says Tom Dreesen got fired for closing his act by saying, "Stick around for Frank." That's just perfect. I can't believe he would have gotten fired for that, but if he says so, then it's probably it. But that's Tom in a nutshell. But Tom did this act with Tim Reed for years and years and years. And I want to talk with him about what has happened to race relations in this country, because it seems to me that before the election of Barack Obama, we pretty much had that licked. We pretty nearly had it in the ground. Almost certainly had it in the ground. But that line, "Stick around for Frank," last time I heard Tommy was about a month ago, and it was at an event, because Gary's leaving California. This was an event from his small group of people, just to surprise Gary and wish him a fond farewell. And everybody went around the room and they said, somebody was talking to me before, and said, it's just going to be so weird not having Gary here. And so when everybody went around the room and had a chance to tell Gary how much he's done for them, he made me who I am. I mean, he and Instapundit really, and Stephen Den Best at USS Clueless, in terms of me sitting in this chair, they're the biggest influence that I had. I told Gary that him leaving Los Angeles meant for the rest of us, it was like the first time that we'd be sailing out of sight of land. That's what it felt like to me, because he's always just been this presence here, But after all of this seriousness, and all of this genuinely deeply felt emotion, just really deeply felt emotion, Tom stands up, and Tom was kind of hosting the thing. Tom stands up and he says, "Okay, look, I don't want to stand here and bore you with another 15 minutes of really great material." And I just thought, that son of a gun, he did it again. But I want to know what it looked like, because when Tom talks about growing up in Chicago and just how multiracial, multi-class the whole thing was. Tom has a lot of stories about guys in World War II, and this guy was the Mick, and this guy was the Wop, and this guy was the Hebe, and all the rest of it. And it was just a form of essentially a form of of love between these guys, and acceptance. And I think we really miss that, and I think it'd be good for all of us to hear about it again. But let me get back to where I was on Cameo, because this idea actually came after the Cameo idea. I was looking at this list of people that you can hire at Cameo. Now, I have to admit that I spent almost all of this time thinking, I could get this guy for $30. You can get a personal greeting for $30 in order to get something that's airable. It's considerably more expensive, but it's not crazy expensive. And so I looked at the people. I'm just going to read it to you because I'm about to make a sales pitch here. I looked at the people I know who I think would be interesting to talk about, especially specifically about things. And I'd like to sit, in addition to the people I mentioned, I'd like to talk to Andrew Clavin about morality, about right and wrong, and why good and evil matter. I'd like to talk to Jeremy Boring about vision, about having a vision and building something. I want to talk to Mike Rowe about the common man. I want to talk to Kevin Sorbo about playing the hero, and I want to talk to David Zucker about Leslie Nielsen and this idea of this untouchable figure walking through this hurricane of chaos and everything around him going to hell, but he's completely immune. These are people who I know. Tom Dreesen I mentioned. Burt Rutan, I want to talk to Burt Rutan about thinking outside the box. I got to know Jason Patrick very late recently, but I'd kind of be curious to know what it was like to be the Terminator. Put Clint Eastwood's name down there just to keep me, chance of that is slim, but there's a chance. I want to talk to Kelly Carlson about being a sex symbol. I want to talk to Greg Gutfeld. I want to talk to John Ratzenberger about what it's like to be in the comedy factory where you're doing this every single week for years and years and years. I think I mentioned how I did 4 spec scripts for Cheers, and how the thing that really surprised me the most. Did I say Jason Patrick from Lost Boys? I'm sorry, I got his name wrong. Terminator 2. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's 2 first names. But when they were doing Cheers, they had a problem. The comedy writers had a problem. The problem was they would write their scripts, and they'd start rehearsal, do a table read on Monday, and everybody loved it. Robert Patrick, sorry, not Jason Patrick, my fault, excuse me, sorry. They would do a table read on Monday, and everybody laughed hilariously, and then on Tuesday they'd start to block the show out on the stage, and everybody laughed. And then by Wednesday they've got they're off book, and they're getting the lines down, and they've said the lines 25, 30, 40, 50 times, and apparently, based on what the writers were telling me, by the time you got to Thursday, and the show records on Friday, by the time you get to Thursday, they feel like the lines aren't funny anymore because they've said them 100 times, and they start asking for changes in the lines. And sometimes the writers would specifically hold back their better stuff, knowing that they're going to have to change some of these lines out. But I just think it would be great to talk about what it's like to be in a show where you're making people laugh every week for 10 years or whatever. And John, by the way, has done a lot of work on the common man. John's a guy who said that we couldn't build the Golden Gate Bridge today, and so on. And I loved his character. When I wrote the 4 spec scripts for Cheers, the A story was always Fraser, and that's a name I'd forgotten. So let me put that down too, for the sake of it. Kelsey Grammer, and Cliff. And I want to know what it's like, because when I was working on a sketch comedy show, that was the most fun I've ever had in my life. Just the writing room on a sketch comedy show was just absolutely the most fun I've ever had in my life. And when you've got a cast that is as solid as the cast on Cheers, there's no weak links on Cheers. Everybody on that show is fantastic. And I know what it's like to be in the writer's room. And having done an improv show, I know what it's like to to perform and watch it, but I want to know what it's like to be surrounded by that kind of comedy talent and to be legendary. Let me see what else I got here. I barely. I've been in. I don't think I've even spoken to him. Been in the same room with him several times with Jim Caviezel. But I'd like to talk to Jim Caviezel very much about what Hollywood has done to him and his vindication. And I put down names like Elon Musk, and I want to talk about. I'd like to talk to Ted Nugent about the serious lack of balls in America, and then I made a list of people from Cameo. And so this is just going to give you some names because this is when I really started to realize this could be something. Hang on one second. Where did it go? I don't know why. They always constantly improve these things and make them worse and worse and worse. Okay, we'll try this one more time. Because I've got them. I wrote them down. All right, must be on the desktop. I thought that would have translated over. Come on, baby. Yeah, here we go. So here are the people that I found on Cameo that I would like to talk to. These are the names that I found on Cameo that we would pay them a pretty reasonable amount of money. I can prime the pump with people I know, I hope. But these are people that I would like to pay, and I think we would just kind of vote on it. We just the membership or whatever would just vote on who to talk to next. But here are some of the names I saw. Robert Hayes from Airplane. I know Robert Hayes. Mark Metcalf. Now that guy's a villain. He's a heavy. I definitely want to talk to Robert Davi, and I know him rather well. I suspect I could certainly approach him about it anyway. I saw Dave Foley there from Kids in the Hall, and I'd like to talk to him about improv and that process and how much fun they seem to be having. Chris Parnell from Saturday Night Live is there, and the thing I find interesting about Chris Parnell is he's just a workhorse. He's not a comedy star. He's not famous for his characters, but he carried the entire show. Victoria Jackson, I've met a few times. I know Victoria Jackson a little bit. And I mentioned Ted Nugent. Air Supply is there. Air Supply. Now, I thought to myself, what the hell am I going to do with Air Supply? But this is how I think how this show could really be opened up. There was a period there where Air Supply owned the airwaves. They just, for 2 or 3 years, they just owned every song that was on the radio. And I want to know what it was. What was that? What did you get in touch with, guys, that made that happen? Okay, so and some of these are just weird, but many of them, like, I have a personal connection to. For example, the next one, Casey from Casey and the Sunshine Band, is available on Cameo. Now, a lot of people didn't like disco music, and I didn't particularly like disco music either, but I still have 3 Casey and the Sunshine Band songs on my iPhone because it was fun music, and when I was in high school, that was what people danced to. And I just think it'd be interesting to talk about. Joe Casale from Devo is available. And on Cameo, he's wearing the red flower pot thing. When I was in high school, that 80s music happened just as I was leaving high school and getting into college. I saw the Devo for the first time when I was a freshman at the University of Florida. But we're coming off of a time when the number one rock and roll song in the country was "You Light Up My Life." That's the number one rock song. And it was just so bland and boring. And then comes Devo with "Whip It." And I couldn't believe my eyes. And I actually went out to a bunch of nightclubs during that. I was a new wave lounge kind of guy. I love new wave music. I love going out to clubs during new wave. And I want to talk to Devo. I want to talk to Devo. I want to talk to Devo. I know Gene Simmons. I'd like to talk to Gene Simmons. I'd like to talk about that whole experience of shock, shock. What about shock? What's the storytelling appeal of shock? Because that's what Kiss was. Wayne Newton is available. I'll tell you who I'd like to do. I'd like to talk to Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees. And now we're getting into a whole string of things that border on just nostalgia, but it's not just nostalgia. I think it's, like I say, life lessons. I mean, I don't want to talk to these guys I don't want to ask them the same questions they've always gotten in their lives before. I want to talk about things that are really important. And I'll tell you the name that sold me on this idea. I'll save it for last. Just going down the list here. All right, sit down. You know who I'd like to talk to? Who I'd like to interview? I'd like to talk to Boy George. I'd like to sit down and talk to Boy George and say, well, Mr. George, or Boy, if I can call you that. I'm a heterosexual American conservative, and I suspect that you're none of those things. And here we are talking about life and art and music and stuff. And ain't that grand? I mean, isn't that just kind of where we need to be right now? I remember when I would tell him this when I first saw him. It was so disturbing that I kind of wanted to strangle him. Why? Why did I feel that way, and why did you provoke that? I know it got you famous, but and I also know it got you a lot of hate as well. And how'd you deal with that? And was it worth it? It's just interesting to me. There's the name I'm saving for last. I can talk to Brett Favre. Brett Favre. You know what I would talk to Brett Favre about? I'd talk to Brett Favre about pressure. I would talk to him about pressure. What's it like to be there when the entire world is watching and it's all on you, basically? Lee Majors is available. That would be a more of a nostalgia kind of thing. Dr. Drew's available. I listened to him all the time back in the day. And this is maybe my second favorite one. Peter Weller is available. So I could sit down and talk about Buckaroo Banzai with Buckaroo Banzai. How freaking cool would that be? I just think that'd be really fun. And not just like, gee, Peter, I really liked the movie. I thought the movie was really, really cool. This is exactly what I don't want to do. I don't want this to be what's your favorite color with celebrities. I want to talk to Peter Weller about how big of a part of Buckaroo Banzai was the fashion. Because this was at the absolute height of 80s fashion, and everybody was dressed in a way that made you think this. And the thing about Buckaroo Banzai is he goes from brain surgery, helicopters out to the desert, drives his Ford through a mountain into the eighth dimension, comes out the other side, and then that night he goes out and he's just shredding a guitar with his scientist pals. And I just said, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I want to be, I want to be Buckaroo Banzai. I really want to be that guy. And Weller's a brilliant guy too. And I think he'd have a lot to say about not about, hey, Peter, tell us about what was your favorite moment in Buckaroo Banzai. I'm not interested in that at all, although I'm sure we'll get a lot of that. I want to ask Peter Weller, what made that character Superman in a way? Just this kind of, what made him the ideal man? Because everything's in there. He's brave, he's smart, and he's cool. You never get that. You usually don't get 2 out of 3. In fact, I can't think of anybody who gets 2 out of 3. But Buckaroo had all 3 of those things. He's brave, he's smart, and he's cool. And how do you build that character? And how do they play off of each other? Thought that'd be interesting. I can for as I don't know what the sum of money is, but I can talk VM. I'm sorry if I can't get it. VM. I'm just gonna have to go with VMV LKC Villenblick. Said the 80s was a happier time. It was a happier time, but I don't want it to be just nostalgia. I'm going to load on the nostalgia, don't get me wrong, but I don't want it to be just about nostalgia. I want people to feel better about the now. I don't want them to feel worse about the now. I want to feel better about the now. So what was it about the 80s that was fun? Because it was fun. Devo is fun. Let's see. You know who else I could talk to? Some of the names blew my mind. Britt Eklund. Britt Eklund, somebody tell me which. She was one of the first Bond girls. She was in one of the first 2 or 3 movies. And she's in her 90s now. But you know what I want to talk to Britt Eklund about? I want to talk to Britt Eklund about men and women. I want to talk to her about masculinity. I want to talk to her about this whole idea of, there are people out there who would say you've just been so exploited in your. I don't think she feels exploited. If she does, I'm interested in hearing about that. But I think talking to Britt Eklund about what has happened to modern sexuality and the relationship between men and women today compared to what they were with Sean Connery and Britt Eklund, I think that would Men with a Golden Gun. So it would be Roger Moore. I think that talking to a Bond girl about modern day, not just modern day feminism, just all of this stuff with women today, I think she'd be a great person to talk to about that. I'm going to save that name too. Bo Derek. Talk to Bo Derek. What's it like to be the most beautiful woman in the world? At least playing the title role in a movie about the most beautiful woman in the world. What's it like? You're much smarter than your character is on screen. Did you feel that, how'd you feel about that? Lady Gaga's not there. Big names, real names, current big stars. I didn't see a single one. But I think she'd have something to talk about. She's conservative as well, by the way. Henry Thomas from E.T. Henry Thomas, if you see, it's available online. I've talked about it on the show before. His audition tape for E.T., where he's off script and they're basically just improvising with him and he's just crying his eyes out. It's the best acting I've ever seen. It's just some of the best acting I've ever seen. And that clip that's on YouTube ends up with off camera Steven Spielberg's voice saying, "Kid, you got the job." I'm curious to know how to me, child actor is an oxymoron. It's like I can't imagine how you could be both of those things. But you were, and you were terrific. Cheryl Ladd is there. That's another thing too, iconic kind of person. Barry Bostwick is there, and Barry Bostwick played Brad in Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I'd like to talk to him about camp. See, this is the point of this series. I think there's lessons to be learned about all of it, but mostly it's about, I want to look at each individual section of the storytelling process, every little compartment of it, because they're all different. Playing the fool is different than playing camp, and playing camp is different than playing the wiseacre, and whether you liked it or not, and I certainly had we did the Rocky Horror Picture Show midnight every year, for months, for a year. And I want to know what it's like to play Brad and, damn it, Janet, and just think it's interesting. Here's a name that'll ring with some of you. Neil McDonough is there. What's it like to be in Band of Brothers? What's it like to do that? I want to talk to Neil McDonough about the reaction that I had and all of you had when that Cadillac ad came out. About we went to the moon. We got bored. We left the car up there. Left the keys in it. We know who's coming back for it. Just that Neil McDonough has played so many all-American guys, a lot of soldiers and stuff, and I think he's interesting to talk about. Tommy Chong, I can't imagine somebody on the world that I have less in common with than Tommy Chong, but that's why I think that would be a great interview, because Tommy Chong is like the world's leading pothead, and I'm not. But just the fact that we could sit and talk about it would be interesting. And I can say to Tommy Chong that when I was in elementary school and junior high, everybody was doing you. Everybody. Dave's not here, man. What do you say to that? You know? Barry Williams is there. Barry Williams from Brady Bunch. Here's what's interesting to me about talking about Barry Williams. Two things, really. One of them is that the Brady Bunch was perhaps, and I would just say this as a person who watched it for 5 years, but on a lot of levels, it is the most banal show that's ever been on TV. It is so white bread and mayonnaise. There's nothing there that you can look at and go, wow. But it owned the culture. What I want to talk to Barry about would be, what's it like to walk through life and have an introduction to everybody. Everybody you meet knows you. You don't have to introduce yourself to anybody. I can tell them truthfully. I could say, Barry, I saw you in a flight school at Santa Monica Airport. It was an FBO. I was checking out a diamond star, and I saw you there at the counter. And I don't know what you were doing there, but it was you. And you'll undoubtedly say, yes, it was me. I knew who you were instantly. Everybody knows who you are instantly. What's that like? I mean, that's got to be kind of amazing, I would think. Just kind of amazing. I don't need to talk to him about his relationship with Florence Henderson, because everybody else has done that. I don't want to do that kind of thing. I'm trying to rearrange this list a little bit just to kind of save the punch, and I'm getting there. I'm going to skip a couple names. Colin Mockery from Whose Line Is It Anyway is there. That's fast. I've been a part of a improv group, and the one thing that they taught me in improv was, wherever the ball is going, you always keep the ball rolling in that direction. You never stop the ball. You never just stop the ball. You're walking into these situations. It's all happening on the fly, and you kind of have to formation fly. You just jump in there. You got to be going the same direction. You can add new twist to it, but you can't reverse it exactly. I'd like to talk to him on some kind. I'd like to talk to Colin Mockery. I'd like to interview Colin Mockery from the perspective of a guy who is at least in a comedy improv company and knows how it works, because I've never seen that before. Bruce Boxleitner, who I know rather well, needless to say, international film and television star Nick Searcy. I'd like to talk to Nick Searcy about the kind of confidence it takes to have self-deprecating humor to make fun of yourself. I love Nick Searcy, and he pays me to say that. So with just a couple more names left here, I'll skip a few. Vic Mignogna is there, who did Star Trek Continues. I want to talk to him about dedication or perseverance, or I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is, But of all the Star Trek fan fiction out there, and I might have done the first one ever, or one of the first ones back in '79 or something, or earlier, '75. But he got Star Trek so right that there have been many times I've watched Star Trek Continues and just felt this shot of adrenaline, like that's William Shatner. And by the way, when you look at Vic Mignogna's picture on Cameo, I was not prepared for that. Vic is a strange cat. Speaking of Axanar, I know Gary Graham. You know, you're a Vulcan ambassador, man. What does that bring? So I just want to wrap this whole pitch up here. So Vic Mignogna, you can talk with. This wouldn't be top of my list, but Mike Carter's available. Who the hell is Mike Carter? Mike Carter is the guy who played the alien with the long things that was standing next to Jabba the Hutt with the big teeth. That guy. Is he recognized as he walks down the street? I suspect he's not. But if you're a Star Wars fan, he was there. You know, saw the whole thing. These are so I've saved just a couple. In fact, I think I've just saved two. Adolph Lundgren, he'd be fun to talk to because he's one of the most brilliant guys ever. He plays this mindless robot death machine. He's got an IQ of 190. He's just one of the most smart guys who ever lived. Here are the two names that interested me the most. And no one's more surprised about this than I am. I want to talk to Sally Struthers. Sally Struthers. Yes, I want to talk to Sally Struthers. I'm sure that Sally Struthers and I disagree about everything politically, but I want to talk about All in the Family. I want to talk about what that show did, how it changed the course of society. I want to talk about Archie Bunker. I want to talk about what Jean Stapleton brought to Edith that made her so lovable, and I want to talk about why people ended up loving Archie more than they ended up loving Mike Stivic. That was not the intention, as I understand it. And I like the idea of talking with people who I don't agree with politically. This is the entire purpose of what I'm trying to get across, is what I'd like to leave all of them with when it's over is, yeah, he seems like a reasonable guy. You know, we talked about football, or we talked about this, or we talked about that, and, you know, it seems interesting. So I'll wrap this little sales pitch up by telling you about the one name I'd like to talk to the most, and this is only a personal thing, but this one actually kind of blew my mind. It really blew my mind. If you go to Cameo, you can get a birthday greeting from, or for a higher price, you can do a commercial project like an interview with Steve Spurrier. When I saw Steve Spurrier there, I said, "Oh, this is really good. This could be something really big." I would talk to Coach Spurrier. I would talk to him about confidence. I know this is on some level unique to the University of Florida, but it's also much bigger than that. And of all the names I saw on that list, that was the one that really just made me like, really? Because I've been waiting, I don't know, nearly 30 years to tell Steve Spurrier how much he meant to me and all of my friends. But that's not in itself interesting. Here's what I would talk to Steve Spurrier about. University of Florida had been playing football for something like 110 years and had not won our conference championship, let alone the national championship. Had not ever won a Southeastern Conference championship in 110 years. And Florida's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, football recruiting state in the country. We just couldn't do it. And I want to tell Steve Spurrier, said, "Coach, first time I went to the University of Florida, My friend was a year older than me. I came up for Gator Growl in 78. And on the field, coach, the night of Gator Growl, and the following day at the homecoming game, somebody had taken gasoline and had written letters in gasoline which kills the grass, and there's nothing you can do about it. And what those words said were, "Dump Dickey," because our previous head coach was Doug Dickey, and I think he'd gone 6-5 or something like that, and been there for a while. And it said, "Dump Dickey," on the field. What do you have to say about that? That's not a hate letter. That's what kind of humiliation is that? So that's just the lead-in. So then so they did dump Dickey, and then they got Charlie Pell, and Charlie Pell came to the University of Florida from Clemson, which I think Spurrier was coach of. I'll do a little research before I get there. And I want to tell Steve Spurrier this story of what his time at University of Florida looked like from the other side. So in comes Charlie Pell, and we think this guy's going to be the answer. And they print up these bumper stickers that say "Give him hell, Pell." And in his first season, he goes 0-10-1, and then they cut up the bumper stickers at the end of the year, and everybody was walking around with driving around with bumper stickers. They just cut them up and rearranged them, and then they said, "Hell, give him Pell." What's that like, Coach? What's that like when you get on the downside of that fandom curve? But I want to tell him what it was like to do this, and there's a story I want to tell him, and then I'll tell you what I want to ask him. I'll tell you what I want to ask him first. I've never seen anybody else do this in football. I'm not saying it's not done. I've just never seen it before. This to me is the essence of Steve Spurrier. When you take the initial coin toss in a football game, you always elect, if you win the coin toss, you always elect to kick, because you want to receive at the beginning of the second half. For those of you not familiar with football rules, there's a coin toss to determine who kicks off the first kick of the game, and then after halftime, the other team gets to receive the ball. And it's always strategically smart when you have the choice offered to you to elect to kick so that you can receive the ball halftime when you have a much clearer idea of what the game is. But alone among anybody I've ever seen, every time Steven Spurrier won a coin toss for the Gators, he elected to receive every time. That meant he was giving up this advantage every time. And we were amazed. And what we found out was that given the offense that he designed, Steven Spurrier wanted the ball from the first second that ball was in play. He wanted the offense on the field from that first second. And for a couple years, we scored on the first possession, I think something like 9 out of 11 games of the year. Scored on the first possession. We are 30 seconds into the game. Gators 7, opponents 0. Steven Spurrier named the swamp. Steve Spurrier did a bunch of these things. But the thing I really want to tell Steve Spurrier is I want to tell him a story. And I got to get the details with a friend of mine, a bunch of my Gator friends. When I tell them I'm get a chance to talk to Steve Spurrier, they're going to lose their minds. But just imagine his reaction to this story. We had gotten to the national championship in '95, and we played Ohio State. And on Sports Illustrated magazine, I think it was Sports Illustrated, on the cover, they had Spurrier, it was a cartoon, Spurrier standing in front of a team that consisted of drag racers, and then the coach of Ohio State standing in front of a team that consisted of steamrollers. So it was offense versus defense, and the defense kicked our ass, and we lost that game. So the next year was Danny Werfel's final year. He was a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. And when Steve Spurrier came to Florida, we knew he was coming home. He was the only Heisman Trophy winner that we'd had, I believe. and he's now a football coach, and now he's coming back to the team and to the location. This is his home. This is where he went to school. It's like the return of Superman or something. So let me just give you this for this 96 season. So we won every single game in 1996. It's an 11-game season. We're playing the last game of the year. It's a non-conference game against Florida State, who we hate. And the reason we hate Florida State is because we either went to Florida or Florida State. Nobody really knew which one they were going to get to, but that's why that's why there's this in-state rivalry, because half of your friends went to Florida State, and so they all must die. And you had to go down the Florida Turnpike and see the Florida State license plates that said 2-time national championships. And we've been playing for 150 years, so on. So this is the year, this is the time, it's now or never. Last game of the season, Florida State. We lose that game, I think, by a field goal. And these places will mean something to Steve Spurrier. And I just want him to know what it felt like. I just want to say, so Coach, there we were at Ashley's. The room was packed. We'd lost to Florida State, our arch rivals. We'd missed our chance at the national championship. This was as close as we were ever likely to get, and it was over. And everybody in the room was crying. Everybody. And in the midst of all of this, after everybody was literally just sitting there, just dumbstruck, because if you lose a game in a college town, the whole town for that week is just shot. You go into Best Buy at Gainesville after you lose to Florida State and ask for a widescreen TV, and they'll say, how much is it? And they'll say, just take it, just take it. So while we're sitting there and starting to file out of this room, this guy stood up. He said, wait, just hang on one second. Just hang on one second. Now just stay with me here. Okay. If, this is off of memory, but if Clemson beats those guys and knocks them out, and then if this thing happens, and then if the University of Texas wins their division against these guys and knocks them out, and by the time he's in this thing, we're saying, just shut up, Mike, shut up. We don't want to hear it. Just stop trying to put a gloss on this. It's over. It's done. Just own the misery, man. No, wait. And this happens, and then this happens. Then Florida State would be ranked number 1, but we'd be ranked number 2, and we'd get them again in the Sugar Bowl. Yeah, to hell with you, Okay, whatever. And that's exactly what happened. And then we got to the Sugar Bowl game against Florida State, the big rematch. We'd always gotten beaten by them when it counted. Kickoff, first possessions, Florida State scores a touchdown. And I'm saying Avenue and 13th Street, and see every single car in the entire county, bumper to bumper, and the sidewalks packed with people, and complete strangers just hugging each other and crying, and just this overwhelming sense of joy. And then we had this kind of a celebration for the team at Florida Field a couple days later. 67. I just think this is interesting. So that's what I want to do. Now, it's occurred to me that everybody else who's in this business. Let me ask a question here. Can you hear me? I mean, are you able to follow the conversation? Because this is important. I've heard it from Twitch and I've heard it from YouTube. Just let me know there, guys. I'm waiting for a little feedback here. No, everybody's talking about lags. I'm very tempted to restart this stream and just splice them together. How about you guys, Twitch? You hearing me? Damn it. Okay. All right. Well, looks like. All right. On and off. I'm going to stay with it. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do with these interview shows. I'm going to sit down I'm hoping for 45 minutes for an hour. Before I did this, I was an editor for Sunday Morning Shootout. I know how to take an interview and cut it down to real gold. I know how to get the air out of those things and just really make it tight. I'm very good at that, and I like doing it. So what I plan to do is, on every one of these interviews, I'm getting people saying restart. I don't know. Restart. I don't know how many people will come back, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to restart because this is important. This is really important. I probably should have led with this. Okay, so let me make a visual note for people. Oh, it's okay. It's over. Pretty good. Video stuttering. I'm lost here. I don't know what to do. I'm going to lose people if I restart it. But at the same time, I don't want this to be chopped up. Fixed. All right. I'm going to stay with it. Just that's that. So here's what I plan to do. For every interview that we do, I'm going to make 3 little clips. Really kind of here's a 60-second moment that's really good. Here's a minute and a half that's really good. Here's a 45-second soundbite that's good. I'm going to do that for 3 of them for each one of these interviews, and those are going up on YouTube for free. And they are going to be essentially teasers. They're window dressing, because I think we're going to get some really great stuff. I'm going to make the edited version available on BillWhittle.com for members only, to finally give our members something of value that they wouldn't get if they weren't members. So in order to see the finished interview, you'd have to be a member at BillWhittle.com, much the same way you have to be a member at Daily Wire and all the rest of these things. That's for the $9.95 a month membership. For the $19.95 a month membership, I'm going to make access to the raw footage. Just from the moment we get into the room and sit down to the moment we end, that's going to go out to the next tier of people. And for the people who are our producing members at our top tier, I'm going to take questions from them. And I will ask at least 1 or 2 of them, of whoever we decide we're going to do next. And we'll announce who we're going to do next. And by the way, on that list of names, I didn't include the one name that actually got me started about this. I'll just say it real quick. So everybody gets to see some highlights. Members get to see the edited video, which is the best version of the video, honestly. The $19.95 a month people get to see raw footage from the moment we sit in to the moment we turn off the lights. And then the top membership level get to ask questions that I will ask them, and I'll mention their name. Here's the name that I saw on Cameo. Steve Spurrier was the name that locked me up at the end, but here's the name that started me. And that name is Bill Mooney. For $350, I can talk to Bill Mooney for an hour, and I can run it for 3 months. And then after 3 months, for an additional 160 or something, I can run it for another 3 months, and I can keep doing that. But Bill Mooney is the name. When I saw Bill Mooney there, I just said, okay, this is what I want to do, because I really need to talk to him. People my age and people close to my age don't understand the importance that Will Robinson had. And I thought about, why is this character so important to me? And I realized it's the only time I can remember when you could be smart and brave at the same time. You weren't just a nerd, and you weren't just a doofus. Time and time again, when everybody's downstairs strapped in and Dr. Smith is singing the blues, Will wants to go upstairs and be part of the flight crew. That's me. That's just me. And it gave it gave the kids who had their hands up first in the class somebody to look up to, somebody to be. And when he goes out there and his dad is captured as he flies his jetpack, you know, John Robinson's captured by this enormous giant, and Will, who's 7 or 8 in this thing, goes out there after this thing, this enormous, huge Cyclops giant, and he shoots it with a laser pistol and rescues his own father. I think most kids have fears of giants when they're growing up. I did. I had nightmares about giants, and then I saw him shoot this giant, and I thought, well, nothing to it. Just make sure you have a laser pistol with you. I want to talk to, and here's something else I want to talk to Bill Mooney about. When I was a kid, I talked to my dad. We were living in Bermuda in a hotel, and I said, Dad, why don't we just invite Bill Mooney to come and stay at the hotel for free for a couple of days? We can just hang out, you know, because I wanted to hang out with Will Robinson real bad. The idea that Bill Mooney and Will Robinson weren't the same people was beyond my comprehension at the time. I'm curious to know whether he would have accepted that. But more importantly, I think I'd like to talk to him about, I used to think you were the luckiest guy in the world because you worked on Lost in Space, but I realize now you're the only little boy in America who didn't get to enjoy Lost in Space. You're the only one who didn't get to enjoy Lost in Space the way we did. Because when I looked at that TV show and I saw that round set of the Jupiter 2, that was a crashed spaceship to me. But to you, it was a curved flat. On the other side of those walls, there were wooden supports, and there are lights, and there are bags hanging, and you can clearly see the dividing line between the painted background set and the sand in the foreground, and you're the only person, the only boy that age in the country who didn't get to have the Lost in Space experience. That occurred to me. That was your job. You saw everything. You never got to hear the robots speak. All you got to hear was Bob May inside the thing going click, click, click. Yes, and he's saying his lines. Dick Tufeld was put in much later. You never got to hear the robot talk to you like a friend the way all of us did. It occurred to me that that's kind of sad in a way, because I don't think you can possibly appreciate how important that was to us, because it wasn't an experience you could have had. That robot was my friend, and there's this plastic grill around the base of his, this bubble head. He's got this neck that pops up and down. He's got this grill, and all of the actors' sight lines are towards the grill because that's where Bob May's eyes are. Now, presumably, these white things up on the top of the bubble are his eyes, but I never saw anybody look at the robot in the eyes. And so when somebody said this is the robot's eyes, I said, no, it can't be right. You know, it's a hat he's wearing or something. Robot's down here someplace. I don't know. I think it's just great nostalgia, but I think I'd like to talk to Bill Mooney about what that role model meant about a kid taking a pistol and going out there and rescuing his father. And we don't see much of that today. And what do you think about that? What do you think about that? They made a movie that, was just, and they made another TV series which was also, Will Robinson is like James T. Kirk. He's part of the culture. He's a mythological creature. And Bill Mooney is Will Robinson, and there is no other Will Robinson. There's no other James T. Kirk, and there never will be. You're a mythological icon, and you changed my life, and millions and millions of lives too. And I had a chance to tell you that in a Mexican restaurant on the corner of Coldwater and Riverside, 15, 20 years ago, and your little boy was there, and that meant a lot to me to see it. Somebody mentioned 2001. I don't believe he was on Cameo, but I'd like to talk to Keir DeLay. Anyway, you get the idea. So I'm going to be making this something exclusively for members to watch all of it, and you heard how this thing breaks down. Now we come to the part of the show where I would much rather have glass stuck in my eyes here. We have become, the financial situation here has become so tight that I can't concentrate anymore. I can't, I can't function anymore. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up, and it's the last thing I think about at night. And I keep thinking that it just has to hang on long enough, another month or two, because another month or two, I get a significant hunk of money for finishing the Frank Luke script, and then we'll, be able to get on with all of this stuff. But honestly, for the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I just can't. I can't. I can't function anymore. It's so much anxiety for me, and I don't know what the hell I'm going to do about it. I'm not going to ask the members for more help because the members have been paying for stuff and they haven't been getting, in my opinion, they have been they have been they have done they have been loyal above and beyond any reasonable call of duty, and I would rather live in the street than ask members for more help. But the Stratosphere Lounge crew is different. Home Depot's hiring and Uber. I think, I got to tell you, I've given it serious thought. Serious thought. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up in Twitch, and I'm hoping Marusha can post it in YouTube. I'm going to put the link to the donate button for a one-time donation. And if there's anything you could do to help, I really, really could use it right now. There it is in the Twitch stream. And and I need to talk about this because this is a Bill problem. And Marusha, if you could copy that over to YouTube, anything that you could do would be deeply appreciated here. And now I need it now. If you've gotten anything out of these 375 shows and you're not a member, link for PayPal. And I feel like this interview show is something that I can do one a week. I don't know what else to say about the current situation. I know politically, I know that wading into it makes me ill, and I want to do something different. And if I could get from here to that interview show without having to do this, I would do it. That's what I've been trying to do for 2 months, is avoid having to go out there and basically say, hey, I really need this help now financially. And the part of me that is so mortified, it's your money, Bill. And I get it 5 times a day. And I understand that. And I see people I respect and admire enormously. James O'Keefe, who I consider to be a friend, just sent out, somebody said, there's a link right there that Marusha put up. It's if you could just keep popping that up there, that'd be great. I can give you an address as well. Actually, this would be the way to go. And James O'Keefe said, I'm being sued by my own company, and I really need your help. And when I hear it from James O'Keefe, I say to myself, well, I'll send James O'Keefe $10 or something. And I don't know why I have such a hard time with this with me, but I do. It's something about how I was raised. And it's not just this kind of Protestant work ethic thing. In trying to understand this, it's connected to something different. Let me just tell you what it's connected to. You can't pin it. Oh, I don't know how to pin it. Could you just keep posting it, Marusha? I don't want to get off the bus here and try to figure out how to do that. Thank you very much for that super chat. But when we were practicing driving together, I was never worried about her. I was never nervous about an accident. But I will tell you something that made my skin crawl, and I tried to figure. We left Bermuda. And I know this has got to have something to do with it, but I can't. I don't know why this is so unbelievably emotionally painful for me, but it is. It is. It just, I don't know. I don't know.